Hi, everyone. You're watching Hold Space, where we hold space for important conversations. My name is Alex Wong. I'm a writer and author based in Toronto. I've written about issues related to Asian representation for publications including the New York Times and ESPN. I've participated in Asian writer mentorship programs over the years. And today I'm joined by four members from the Raptors organization: Bobby Webster, general manager of the Raptors; Yuta Watanabe, a player on the team; Aprille Deus, community coach with the Raptors, also assistant coach with the Ryerson University men's basketball team; and Roven Yao, senior manager media relations of the Raptors. And we're going to have a conversation. We've all seen what's been going on in the Asian communities with the rise in Asian hate crimes and how that's bled into the basketball space. Want to have this conversation about the inclusion of Asians in the basketball community and how we can also individually and collectively move this conversation forward. Now, I want to get to the panelists right away, but I just want to clarify two things before we get into the conversation. Number one, I think a lot of times when we have these discussions about Asians and Asian communities, we tend to treat the term Asian as this monolith, and I think there's a danger in grouping all Asians together, and that's how a lot of stereotypes can get perpetuated. So while I know everyone on the panel today comes from their own individual experiences that are very different, we certainly aren't capturing and reflecting all of the experiences of people across the Asian diaspora. So I just want everybody watching to be mindful of that. And number two, I think a lot of conversations that we're having today will be about our experiences in the basketball space, and by no way do we want to distract from the larger conversations that are happening in the Asian community. Hopefully this can complement the larger conversation that's happening and we can move the convo forward. So Bobby, maybe I can start with you. You've obviously seen the headlines, you've read about what happened to Jeremy Lin being called coronavirus by another player in the G League bubble. I'm wondering, what your reactions are to that. And as someone, as an Asian in a position of power, in the basketball space, are there challenges that you've had to navigate personally because of your identity?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone to be on here. I think first I want to say it's okay to speak up on this. I think there's some of, or at least the cultural norms that I was brought up in, and some of these are Asian and some of these aren't. But to not want to stick your neck out or not want to be the outlier or bring attention to yourself. And so even part of this conversation, I'm sure for all of us, is uncomfortable to have because it's not something that a lot of us have probably been brought up to do. And so as I kind of talk to people in my own Asian American community, I think that's one thing that we're all realizing as well, is that we should be talking, we should be modeling, we are in positions, or if you are in a position to represent the group, or you're in a position to represent yourself on a much larger platform, then do it, and don't kind of do what we typically do, which is shy away from it, or not want to bring attention to ourselves. And so I think that's a big one for me, just right off the bat. And so to see Jeremy do this over, we had the benefit of having Jeremy here in Toronto, but also following his career. I lived in New York when he was with the Knicks, and I think he's really taking that mantle and being willing to be out front of it. And it probably makes us a bit comfortable, but I think it takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of courage for him to do that. And so we applaud him for that.
Yeah, Aprille, I want to throw it to you too. Obviously, I know just even navigating the space of being a basketball coach as a woman comes with its own set of challenges. As an Asian woman in the space, I'd love to hear about your personal experiences and anything that you kind of want to call out and share.
Yeah, and thank y'all for having me. This is a very special moment to talk about these kind of issues. And for me, within the coaching space, I can't recall a time that I've ever seen someone who looks like me. I think the closest would be Natalie Nakaze out at LA Clippers. And for me, my journey hasn't been easy, not because I've heard racist comments or have been bullied in any sense, but it's more so being overlooked with my small stature, 5'4", not being an NCAA athlete, not going pro, and now just starting my career at the OCAA level, at the U Sport level. It's a little difficult to still realize that there's not many women, Asian women, Filipino women, representing us at the highest levels. And so I'm just looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, Utah. Obviously, you grew up in Japan and moved to the United States to play basketball here. I'd be curious to know what that experience was like for you when you came to a new country and realized that you were in a space where there were not a lot of people who came from your background or looked like you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And today with this deep topic, I'm using my translator today, Takumi. So I'm speaking Japanese, and he's gonna speak English for me. 日本からまずアメリカに来て、本当言葉の面とか文化の違いとかで本当にたくさん本当に苦労したことは今まであったんですけど、僕はまだ個人的にその差別というかそういうのに関しては直接受けたことっていうのは今までなくて、本当に今まで僕をサポートしてくれたコーチ陣やそのチームメイトたち、その本当周りの人たち含めてもう素晴らしい方たちばっかりだったんで、本当個人的に今までそういう経験をしたっていうのはないんですけど、だからその分なんか余計に今まではちょっと他人事みたいな部分があったんですけど、やっぱりもっとこうやっていろんな人の声を聞いて、どういう状況が今起こっているのか、そのアジア人の中でアジアアメリカンの中でどういう差別をみんなが受けているのかっていうのをもっと知って、僕もNBA のアスリートとしてもっと声を上げていかなきゃいけないんじゃないかっていうのは最近すごく思うようになりました。
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Utah. Roven, I want to ask you too. I think you've obviously established yourself in this basketball space, and I feel like whether it's media relations or any kind of other department, we do rarely see a lot of Asians or any Asians in this space. I'd love to hear what you have to say about just the recent events or any personal experiences that you like to share.
Yeah, Bobby and I were just chatting actually a few minutes ago about the experience, things that we share in common and things that we see from our own individual perspective. And one that's kind of stuck out for me just in conversations with people is sort of realizing the time and space that we're in. A lot of us are descendants of immigrants, first generation or second generation. My kids are, a mix of Chinese and Filipino. And, for me growing up, I didn't really understand what the difference was. Growing up in Canada, in the suburbs, it was just normal to be from somewhere else. But there were always reminders that you weren't the same as everybody else as well. And it was stuff that people would say. It was the food that you ate. And, I was fortunate. I came to the United States for school and got introduced to an industry that's given me so much. And everybody's right. Like we don't really have people, or at least when I started, that look like us. So, you can take it one of two ways. You can say, that's a hindrance, or you can, I guess, go with the flow and adapt. And so for me in my journey, that was there was a lot of adaptation. I had a lot of help along the way, a lot of people who saw past the exterior and what's in here and what's up here, and used it within the context of basketball. So I think, everybody in our organization is familiar with Wayne. Wayne and I became really good friends because of Chinese food. He told me a story one time about how when new players went to the Boston Celtics, Red Auerbach would invite you out for dinner, usually within the first few days that you were there. And it was always Chinese food. So when I was first starting out with the Raptors and I was single and living on my own, one day Wayne just invited me out for Chinese food. And I had no idea. I knew the story of Wayne. I knew about Red Auerbach. I knew about the Boston Celtics, but I had no idea that it was tied in somehow with Chinese food. And through that, I got to meet a lot of Wayne's friends. Tommy Heinsohn, we used to joke with him all the time because he hated Chinese food and he absolutely refused to come out with us. I think he turned down Red at one point too on an invitation to go out for Chinese food. So there's so many things that we can look at that we can say are hindrances or separate us, but there are also a lot of things that bind us together as a community, not just for Asians, but we're really lucky to be in a sport that embraces the differences. And to me, this conversation is just an extension of, what went on in the summer. A lot of things, we all know were brewing. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not is, up to each individual. But I think a part of it, the reason why it's becoming to the forefront now is because we were always taught not to rock the boat. Don't make a problem out of something that isn't somebody else's problem. So that's kind of what my thoughts are right now.
Yeah, I think it's great to be sharing a lot of these experiences, especially just the experiences in the basketball space that we've dealt with. But I know we're recording this, just a few days after another targeted Asian hate crime that happened in Atlanta, and I feel like there's a lot of people right now in the Asian community that are not just fearing for their own people, their families, and friends, and a lot of them just want to know like what, not only kind of what they can do, but what other people that are not in the Asian community can do. And I want to ask you, Bobby, like forget about the basketball stuff and the basketball role that you're in, like just as a fellow Asian, like what do you want to say to kind of be able to move this conversation forward, given all the hate crimes that are happening right now?
Yeah, so with any marginalized group or group that's discriminated against, I think as we're seeing it's super important for those groups to respect each other, also champion each other's causes, and so I think in this moment, I think what we're seeing is in its early stages just a huge push for awareness, and that's part of why we're doing this, and that's part of why we're talking about it, whether it's the shootings that happened in Atlanta, or a lot of the discrimination probably felt since the beginning of COVID, overt in the case of violence, or it was just kind of underneath the surface in comments or attitudes toward Asians. I think that's the big one is the awareness of it, and as we bring this to light, then we can start to move on and think about how to fix it and have solutions. And obviously those are much more difficult and much more nuanced. But I think right now it's the awareness to it that it's been going on. Like Roven said, it's part of the culture is to not bring attention to it or sweep it under the rug. So no, let's step out. Let's not do that, and let's tell everybody. Let's make sure people know about it. If you are in a position, or if you're the media, or if you have a platform, let's get that out.
Yeah, Aprille, I think on a similar kind of question, I just want to know kind of what your reaction to seeing these things are, because I know right now a lot of these crimes are being targeted towards specifically Asian women and the elderly, and I think it is important, I feel like, for people to know how we're feeling right now as a community.
Yeah, and the crazy thing to me, especially through social media channels, is seeing just the outpour of support, sharing of, like Bobby said, like just knowing what's going around us, what's going on, and like you mentioned earlier, there's that extra layer of being a woman that puts us just a little bit lower than everybody else when you get through every ethnicity. And so for me, I think it's the first time I've truly been in shock. Not to say that I didn't ever think this was possible, but to have it come to life and to see hate crimes against Asians and against Asian women, that's a pretty scary thought for me. And my heart goes out to those that we've lost and those families that care for those individuals. And I'm just lucky to be surrounded by other strong Asian women who are not afraid to voice their opinions about this and to share the news that's been circulating.
Yeah, and you know, April, I think you made a really good point earlier too. You know, when you talked about how coming into the coaching space, you know, one of the things is that you're constantly overlooked. You know, because you're a woman and because you're Asian, and I think that's another important thing for us to talk about. It's just that stereotypes that perpetuate themselves, you know, over time, and it's a way of how we stop viewing Asian people as just fully formed people. Like people just gather these stereotypes and view us in this way. And, you know, I want to call out kind of two really poignant articles that I've read the last few years. You know, the Washington Post did a really good article last year about how a lot of coworkers continue to confuse their Asian coworkers for one another. And, you know, this was just kind of a systemic problem that takes place in the workplace. And also another piece written by New York Times NBA writer Andrew Kay a few years ago, where he detailed his personal experience in NBA locker rooms, being referred to as Jeremy Lin and being referred to as Jackie Chan. And I can say that, you know, as someone who's worked, you know, in the basketball space as a reporter, you know, I've had these experiences personally. And, you know, I just want to ask, maybe starting with Utah, if there are any kind of, if you've had any, you know, feelings, you know, playing in the U.S. or playing in the NBA about stereotypes that you've had to deal with that you think are not fair or should be called out.
まあ、僕自身はそんなにやっぱりそういうの経験はしてきてはないんですけど、ただやっぱりそのアジア人っていうだけでどうしてもこう下に見られるというか、どうしてもアジア人はバスケットボールができない、アメリカ人に比べて劣ってるっていう部分でやっぱり見られる部分は絶対にありますし、でやっぱり僕自身もただ僕が感じなかっただけできっとそうやって見られてた部分は絶対にあると思うんですけど、ただやっぱりそういうことをこうしっかりと感じて言葉に出すっていうのがやっぱり大事なんじゃないかなっていうふうに思ってて、やっぱりそういうステレオタイプを持っている人たちは、いくらやっぱ口でまず伝えないとやっぱり分かってもらえない部分は当然あると思いますし、でやっぱり口で言ってもやっぱりそれだけでは分かってくれない人っていうのもやっぱたくさんいると思うんで、そういう人たちにはしっかり自分がこの舞台でしっかりとプレーしてアジア人もしっかりバスケットができるんだっていうのを僕も日本人としてアジア人としてその代表の一人としてそういうことを行動として証明していくことで、少しでもそういうのは減っていくんじゃないかなとは思っています。
Yeah. Roven, I want to know if you have any thoughts about just, you know, this perpetuating of Asian stereotypes that takes place kind of, you know, across different workspaces.
My thing is, you know, when it comes to stereotypes, it's about being human. You know, we all breathe the same air. We all put our clothes on the same way. It's about what the condition of your heart is. I've been fortunate to be on the receiving end of a lot of love and support along my journey. I feel it's disrespectful for me to hate anybody on their journey along that way. So it doesn't matter to me what culture or ethnicity you come from. If you're part of, you know, particularly of a basketball community, it's all love there. You know, it's all about supporting each other. It shouldn't be about hating one person over another because they look different than you. One thing that I do notice within, you know, all different basketball environments, we're very much a culture of like give and take, particularly when you're dealing with locker room situations and in the media. Yeah, there are things that are said that are probably politically incorrect, stereotypical towards us. But again, one of the things that we're taught growing up is like, be better than, you got to be twice as good as everybody else. And part of that is being able to absorb it. And I think that's part of the reason why you've been so quiet for so long. I know I've been able to absorb it on different levels. Is it right? Probably not. Did I gain the respect of some people along the way? Maybe that needs to change a little bit. But that is an element of what we deal with, I think, at least on the basketball side, is some of that give and take.
I do think, Roven, you make a really good point, about, I do think those things need to change, and I think we've talked so much on this panel about the things that we need to do, but there's also conversations that I feel like we need to have collectively with, other people that are in the workspaces. And, there's a clear difference between jokes and kind of things that do cross the line and they do perpetuate the stereotypes. And, before I throw it to everyone for their final thoughts, I do want to say, as someone that works in the media space in basketball, I want to use this opportunity as an open invitation to invite, editors and people in positions of power at publications, whether it's in Toronto or somewhere else, and also the Raptors organization to reach out to me, because I want to share a lot of these stories about media members, feeling excluded, a lot of the experiences and these conversations that have been happening privately that I think we should have collectively, with everybody in the industry. So I do want to make that point because I feel like all of us should be viewed as fully formed people and not just by these stereotypes. Bobby, I'll throw it to you. I know you've shared a lot of your thoughts on this. If you have anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap this up.
I'll just keep it quick. I think it's kind of what you're getting at is just for everyone to be thoughtful about the way that they not just deal with Asian people or just anyone that's different than them, and to just think before you make a comment or before you let your mind jump to a conclusion. I'm sure most of you saw the Oscars for the first time in its history had an Asian lead nominated, and that's 93 years. So just think about all the things that would go into not having an Asian lead be nominated for an Oscars, and how many things structurally would have to be in place for that never to happen. And just, maybe that'll give you a perspective on, how the little things that you do over the course of a day or the bigger things that society, stereotypes Asian as could lead to something kind of as drastic as that.
Yeah. Aprille, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I think my final thoughts, if I have anything for our viewers, is to be mindful of your intention behind your language, referencing and understanding that the Asian diaspora is not just one collective titled Asian grouping. And for our youth especially, I know that with everything in terms of what's happening, racism against Black people, I heard a story quickly about he's a personality on TV. His name escapes me, but his son had been trying to scrape his skin, saying that he doesn't want to be Black. And so, for me, it's just taking pride in who you are, and there's so much more to life than just being a citizen of your country, but knowing your heritage. I mean, there's a lot of beauty in that, so embrace that.
Yuta?
だから僕自身がやっぱりそういう経験が今まで少なかったんで、本当にもっといろんな人から話を聞いて、どういう状況が起きているのかっていうのを本当にまず知ることが僕自身大事だなと思ってて、でやっぱり僕も発言力のある立場に NBA 選手として発言力のある立場にいると思うんで、それをいろんな人から話聞いて、僕自身ももっともっとそれをさらにたくさんの人に知ってもらうことによって少しでも改善されていく部分はあると思うんで、やっぱり僕の今いる NBA 選手っていう立場をもっと有効的に使っていかなきゃいけないなっていうふうには思っています。
Yeah, thank you, Yuta. Roven, I know you've shared a lot, on this panel. I don't know if you have kind of anything else, kind of final thoughts.
Good communications person always has 3 points that they want to make. So I'll finish with 3 quick things. One, what we're dealing with as a society, it all starts in the heart. Jeremy and Lynn, I was really fortunate that we got to cross paths on our journeys, and we shared a lot about our common faith. and an understanding of where the love comes from. And, as Christians, we need to spread that love. And it doesn't matter what religion you are. It all starts right here. Hate comes from within. Yes, it can be passed down. It can be a learned thing. So we have to combat it, no matter what religion or whatever background you come from. It starts with the condition of your heart and your love for other people. Number two, as somebody that's been in the industry for a while, it's my honor and my duty to help support, front office, coaches, players, especially of Asian culture, to become leaders. We're still in our infancy when you look at the timeline of history. We're a lot of first and second generation folks, particularly within the basketball community. We haven't been around that long, and we need to get there. And to have folks that you can identify with, for my kids, for Bobby's kids, for the next generation, that's going to be the next step. And a lot of it is going to come out of love, out of servanthood, from people like myself. We have a lot of guys on our staff right now, like Ray Chow, Johnny Lee, Tim Chung. We're not all going to be leaders, but we can help support leaders, especially the young ones, like Bobby, like Yuta. That's part of our calling now. And then third thing, I would say, as a basketball community, particularly with Asians, we need to be able to identify with that. We need to be able to identify the different sectors within that community and support each other that way.
Yeah, no, I think those are three really great points, Roven. And I just want to thank everyone, for being part of this panel. And if I can add just a quick, footnote to those points that you made before you wrap up, I think it's a really good point that you made about how we all do have these networks of Asian people that have embraced us in our different workspaces. And I think it's important to know, because I think if there's a coach out there who wants to be like Aprille, or if there's someone who wants to work in a basketball organization like Roven or like Bobby, or someone who wants to be a writer, like myself and all those other Asian writers that you've mentioned, Roven, it's that these networks exist, and I want them to know that they exist, and I want them to know that they can be a part of them. And if being part of those networks is the start of them feeling inclusive before even talking about all the other problems that we're facing, then I think that's a really good starting point. And the last point I'll make too is that I know we touched on so many different things today, and I think it's great we shared on these experiences, but I don't want anybody watching to think that this is somehow just like one conversation that we need to have. For me, this panel is the start of a larger conversation that we need to continue having. And one quote that I read that really stuck with me recently is, somebody said that to actually create change, there are people that actually have to be willing to risk something. And truthfully, for me, speaking from just the media space, there's not enough people, whether they are my coworkers or where they're people in positions of power at these media outlets, that are willing to risk anything and challenge structures that are in place that are holding back, the inclusion of a lot of Asian writers right now. So again, I issue an open invitation to anybody who wants to speak with me on this. I hope we can have these constructive conversations, and I hope everyone is serious about making that change. And I just want to thank everyone again on this panel for sharing your experiences, and want to thank everybody for watching. Hopefully this gives you a lot to not only think about, but to talk about within your own social networks. So that wraps up this panel. Thank you again to everyone, and thank you for watching.